So what are we having for lunch today? We got the breakfast burrito, the vegan style from the Co-op. Been sampling their burritos that they have over there lately. Pretty good. I mean, decent size as far as that goes. They pack them pretty good. Right on. 29 of you. Bingo later? Absolutely, there's bingo later. I hope you all make it for that. What did you guys say? The Fed will taper and have everyone begging to bring back the cheap money. Absolutely, they will. That's what I'm going to be talking about here in just a little bit. I'll put a couple of links down there in the description for you guys to two different speeches given by one by Ben Bernanke back before he was like chairman or anything else, and the other one is from John Williams, the New York Fed president, and they're pretty good. Like the one from Ben Bernanke is old. It's one that I've referred to or referenced back to many times in the past, talking about the credible threats, where I came up with that idea for credible threats and how the Federal Reserve is going to be using that as part of their monetary policy. It's explained very well inside of that speech, and it really, like I said in the description of this video, it really paints a picture of what we have going on today. I mean, if you read those speeches and you look at some of the other speeches that were given around that time, you're going to see that the Federal Reserve is very much concerned about deflation. Not so much about the inflation. They're very concerned about deflation inside of those speeches. And you think about it, like when you read those speeches, you realize like it's a demographics issue that they're talking about. It's an innovation, like, all the new technologies that are coming out and making things easier on people, meaning less workforce. That is going to be a very difficult thing for the economy to try and absorb, is having less people working and more people taking from the system. That right there is going to get very cumbersome. Now, part of the problem with the Federal Reserve right now is that they have ruined their monetary policy because they've gone to the lower bound of zero, meaning that dropping interest rates from this point on is very difficult, seeing as how dropping interest rates would go into negative territory. They already know that going into negative territory is not going to be the winning solution that people seem to think that is going to be obvious for the Fed to take. It doesn't quite work like that. Now, part of the problem right now is that we have cash in the system. And like I said, I've said this many times in the past. They are going to go into a digital currency, a central bank digital currency. And in order to do that, the Federal Reserve has to change the way their monetary policies are operating. Now, they cannot just directly inject money into the system. Like, they cannot print up money and just willy-nilly hand it over. Although there is kind of arguments about how it is that they could do that or that they would do that. It's not necessarily inside of the availability of their tools, so to speak. The Federal Reserve has to print up money and then buy something. And normally that's going to be like U.S. Treasuries and mortgage-backed securities and different things like that. They're basically lending that money into the system. If they don't do it that way, then you can end up with the situation where you have that hyperbolic hyperinflation, just runaway like money printing. But because there is the principal that is lent in but not the interest that is due, there is no way to ever get out of the debt. Like, you could pay off every single debt that has ever been out there, but there is not enough money to pay the interest rate on it. So you have to borrow more money in order to keep the system constantly functioning. But we're running into a situation where borrowing money and going into that zero negative interest rate is just not going to be possible. It's just not going to work. So what the Federal Reserve would really like to do is to be able to raise their interest rates, to get some of their ammo back, to get that firepower back. But you can't really raise interest rates if the inflation isn't up. This is where the situation where we're coming into now. They locked down the entire economy. They shut down production. They shut down pretty much all commerce. Gave everybody a bunch of money through the Treasury. Remember, this is like a Treasury stimulus package. It wasn't the Federal Reserve who was printing up the money and just handing it over. It was the Treasury who was issuing out checks. Federal Reserve was just giving that availability to them, saying, yeah, we'll buy as many treasuries as you need in order to push out all them checks. Once that money flowed out into the system and people started buying up a lot of stuff, it depleted the inventories out there. Great. Now we got a spot where we have lots of inflation because we got a huge demand for products that just aren't there on the shelves to buy. Supply and demand. Federal Reserve got what they wanted. Interest rates are starting to rise on account that they're going to try and fight the inflation that has taken place due to the fact that we have a bunch of shortages. Right? You see what's happening here? So, in my opinion, what's going to happen here is that all this stuff that is sitting out there waiting in the warehouses and out there on the ships and everything else that seems to not be able not I can't talk, is not able to flow through the system or get out there into the retail market, eventually will find its way out there. And when it does, they're not going to give you cheap access to interest rates, to cheap access to credit to buy all this stuff. What you're going to do is you're going to end up having to pay for it. And you're going to pay a lot higher price for it. Either that or you're going to have the cash. This is the reason why I say cash is king. It's because during these times when it gets difficult to acquire credit, you have to have the cash. There's no other way. And if there's less people with a less available credit, well, then the asset prices begin to come down. And that's where the pain will begin. That painful experience that people will have watching the asset prices fall or the lack of available credit is where they will begin to demand something from Congress. They will beat down their doors. They will cry and cry until Congress does something about it. And they will change the way the Federal Reserve is chartered, giving them the availability to central bank digital currencies. And then the Federal Reserve will be able to inject money directly into people's wallets. At that point, they can take interest rates negative. Now, that whole process is going to take quite some time because part of that process is being able to pull a lot of the cash out of the system or to be able to set up the system in such a way that you can discourage people from using cash. And that is going to be like charging people to deposit or to remove cash from the banking system. Whether you take a withdrawal or put a deposit in, they're going to charge you a fee for that. That will discourage the cash, the cash hoarding or usage and push everybody into the digital currency. And like I said, the people will beg for it. They will absolutely beg for this. Now, in the meantime, like I said, I think the Federal Reserve is going to try to raise interest rates to get some sort of ammo back, because that whole painful process it's not going to be very pretty. I mean, people are going to think it's going to be the end of the world because it's going to be worse than anybody has ever imagined. I mean, you listen to Jim Rogers talk about how it's going to be the worst in his lifetime, and he's seen a lot. That's the type of stuff that I'm talking about too. Now, one of the things that I had mentioned yesterday in the videos was talking about how cash is king, right? And I've already established that in this video from what we can see happening here in the United States. But think about all the debt out there. Think about how much debt has been, just take Evergrande. Take Evergrande and times it by however much you want to whatever number you want, because it's way beyond Evergrande. And think about when Evergrande started to fail, how much demand for dollars they wanted. They would take anything. They sold everything they could to try and keep the debt going, to try and make the debtors, make the bondholders happy to keep their business from going into default. Think about what they were selling off. They were fire selling everything, and people who had the cash were able to get that stuff up. Imagine that on a grand scale, where everybody's trying to exit out of their debts. That is going to create a huge demand for dollars. And even if the people out there, the foreign countries or whatever, wanted to get out of the US dollar and no longer use US dollars for their trade, they still have to pay off their debts. They have to get the hold of the dollars first before they can get out of it. That is going to create a huge demand for dollars, especially if it gets into a panic situation. Anyway, I'm going to eat some more of my burrito. What are you guys talking about? Dollars and cents, buddy. Hyperinflation, inflationary depression. Yeah. Oop. Okay, so most of the interest rates, when they're talking about interest rates, the reason that's big deal to the public, where it's markets to the public so heavily because of the cost of homes and cars. Yeah. How can you have negative interest rates? Yeah, that's a really interesting one. How do you have negative interest rates? Well, imagine it's hard to wrap. It took me a long time to wrap my head around negative interest rates and what you would expect to see from a negative interest rate environment. Negative interest rates have existed inside of like some of the other nations out there when it comes to like sovereign debt, where, and this is hard to kind of wrap your head around if you're not understanding how like the sovereign debt works. Basically, you have a contract that is going to pay out a particular amount with a coupon rate attached to it. That coupon rate doesn't change. The price, the face value of the bond, that doesn't change. What does change is the price that somebody's willing to pay for it. And the negative interest rate comes when somebody is willing to pay so much for that bond that if they held on to it for maturity, not only would they get back less money than what they had paid for it, right? But then they would not be able to sell it at any time for a profit. That's a negative interest rate. Right? Now, it's not even really a good explanation of negative interest rates, because when you start thinking of negative interest rates when it comes to like your bank account, you deposit your check into a savings account and you immediately get back less than what you deposit. That would force people to not deposit their money into the bank. I have a very difficult time understanding how it is that a system can operate with cash and have that sort of scenario taking place. I just don't see it, because people would just basically cash everything out and just hold it in cash. So that's where the central bank digital currency would have to exist during that time. But let's say there's negative interest rates attached to, say, a mortgage, right? And now we did see some of this take place in where was it? Norway or something like that? I can't remember exactly where, or Denmark. Anyhow, they had an adjustable rate mortgage that had gone into negative territory for a short amount of time, where they were actually paying back less than the principal, which is amazing to think. Now, that was an adjustable rate. I don't think it lasted very long, and from what I understand, I don't think there's any negative mortgages out there right now. But then I got to thinking about, like, what if you had a fixed negative interest rate on your home loan? Now, knowing that the individual who is going to lend that money out is going to get back less than what they had borrowed or what they had lent out does not make sense at all. Like, how is that even possible that you can lend this money out and then get back less than what you have lent and then find that to be like a feasible thing? Now, if it was that you wrote a contract up that said, yes, this contract is going to pay back less than what I am lending out, but if interest rates go deeper into negative territory, this contract can actually be sold for a profit. Now, if you can understand that, then you can understand why it is the banking system might want to put negative interest rates into the mortgage system, as they can cause the contracts, the mortgages, to continue to go up in price as the interest rates go deeper into negative territory. That's hard to understand, but once you kind of get that, you can see where the banks would want to push it. Now, I think as an individual, if you had a negative interest rate on your mortgage, that would seem like, wow, man, this is really badass. I hope like I get to pay back less than what I borrow. That's incredible. But think about this for a minute. If you paid off your debt early, you end up paying more for your loan than if you didn't. So you take out a 30-year loan, negative interest rate, and if you pay that thing off early, you end up paying a higher price for it. Tell me that doesn't lock you in for life on a debt. See, the whole point is to get everybody into a debt-paying system. And once you go negative, paying off your debts early is not beneficial to you. Right? It's actually damaging. It costs you more to pay off your debts early. So if there was ever a time in which that there was negative interest rates and people were taking out loans and negative interest rates, I feel that that would be like the banker's dream, because they would have everybody locked in for life, paying interest rates, and then continuing those interest rates deeper, because you can go as deep as you want into negative territory, and it would cause the value or the price that they could sell those debt instruments, those financial assets. It would give them the ability to sell those things for even more profit. So, kind of a scary spot to be in if you really think about it. Anyway, what are you guys talking about? I'm so hungover right now. Tell me, how much does one Bitcoin weigh? Yeah, that's interesting. So far, you don't think Bitcoin is real money? You make it. Well, Bitcoin is, listen, the only thing that is, everything can be money, right? Anything can be money as long as you can do a change of value or just in exchange with it. Like, anything can be that way. It could be food, it could be gold, it could be silver, it could be money. There's difference between like money and currencies. And there's a difference. When you go down to the store, it's going to be very difficult to use your Bitcoin when you say, I just want to do a Bitcoin transaction. I don't want to use the cash. I don't want to use currency. I just want to use this Bitcoin. Now, I am a believer in Bitcoin. I hold Bitcoin and I buy Bitcoin once a week. Every week I buy Bitcoin. I dollar cost average into it. I use it as nothing more than a speculation into what I feel is probably going to be a much more realistic type of currency coming into the future. Because this old system of debt-based currency that enslaves the people, I just feel that it's eventually going to find its way out of usefulness as the people become aware of the way it works. How long that takes, I don't know, but it's obvious there's new stuff coming into the game. Like, it's the digital currencies are not going away. And for people to say like they are all gonna be worth zero someday, I really doubt that. I seriously doubt that. You don't hold all your eggs in one basket. Power goes out and then you use worthless cash, gold, silver, or bullets. Okay. Yeah. I try not to be the doomsday scenario kind of guy. Like, I don't sit around wondering how bad the world is going to get. I have these kids that I want to raise inside of a beautiful world. And you try to live the world you want to see, right? There is some bad stuff that's taking place out there. There's stuff that you have to be aware of, and you can't be like, oh, I'm just not going to look at that thing because it's just too scary of a situation. But, to have this mindset of like, I got to get ready to go and fight a war of some sort where there's going to be like death and destruction. I don't look at that. Like, there was a time I did, and it's depressing, and I'm not doing it. There's going to be a situation where it's tough, and there's going to be situations where it's easy. I try and gear my life and my family and everything else so that it leads into the easy life, right? The easier life. I'm not a violent person. I just don't think of it that way. And I'm not going to try. So, yeah, you can protect yourself with bullets and be ready for that. I am. I don't know how many people out there practice, shooting their firearms every, couple of months just to make sure that, they're everything is working the way it's supposed to, but it's not a bad idea to make sure that, those things are working, that you have adequate, rice and beans sitting in the pantry, that you have these things that are prepared, and then you cannot dwell on the idea as much, right? You can move on to what's taking place in the world. And there's some people who are just so like focused in on a zombie apocalypse type scenario that it's just like it makes it very difficult to try and see what's going on out there in the world, or to actually enjoy the beautiful things that are still out there, and that get created every day. I mean, people get upset. Man, here comes the rain. People get upset talking about like all the new technologies and stuff. I love it. I mean, I love all the new stuff that is coming out. Yes, it is going to be very intrusive into your life, but think about how convenient everything is going to get. I mean, it's going to be awesome. I'm really looking forward to all the AI movement and stuff. But you do have to be cautious of the potential damaging effects from it. So I don't know. Anyway, that's just me kind of babbling off. What else are you guys talking about? Precious metals will do nothing. Oh, good Durango. Man, Durango, I'm glad you're still here. Durango 95, he just hates these metals. But, you have always been a follower, and, I appreciate every comment. I really do. Well, doomers can be exhausting to talk to, but again, if you didn't take in the worst case scenario, then you might set yourself up for failure. Like, how many people, like during the great financial crisis, said nobody saw this coming, yet there was plenty of video evidence out there on YouTube of people talking about that exact scenario taking place, but nobody saw it coming, right? Will AI make up for decreased production from aging population? Well, yeah, it will, but the problem with it is that how do you employ the people to buy all those products? That's where the UBI thing starts coming into play, where people are like, well, we need UBI to buy all this stuff that AI is going to start building for us. I mean, I still have a hard time trying to understand how it is that you can have some sort of currency that you just give out there to the people and not cause like prices of this rain's really coming down. Cause the prices of like the basic necessities to go through the roof. I mean, that's what would happen. Eventually, the basic necessities would come to the point that it would be so burdensome to get that you would have to constantly increase this UBI just to make the availability of the basic necessities to the people. It's a trap, in my opinion. It's a total trap. See, I got about 7 minutes left here, guys. What am I drinking today? I got the Healthy Kombucha Cayenne Cleanse. I like the spicy stuff. Is there a credit default swap problem with Chinese bonds? I don't know. I mean, that was something that I was concerned about, but you got to think like this credit default swap market, I think a lot of that is pretty opaque. Like you can't really see how much is out there that could, that would have to be paid out if there was a default. Like, I don't know if there's like a place that you can go to that shows all those numbers out there, because from what I understand, that's part of the shadow banking system. It's part of all those derivatives markets that are very hard to try and grasp the implications of some of the stuff if there was to ever to start having a run on defaults. That's what basically took down the great financial crisis. I mean, these credit default swaps, they didn't know how bad that was going to be of a situation. They're eating black swans in Korea. Have a guess at what the Black Swan event will be? I don't know. To be honest with you, I think once the issue with corporate debt defaults start kicking in here in the United States, I think that's probably going to be a pretty big issue. Like if the Evergrande kind of situation really did start spreading throughout the rest of the world, and something like that was to take place here in the United States, like an Evergrande, but bigger. Like I couldn't tell you who or what or when, but if something like that was to take place, then who knows? Who knows? Because like right now, the corporate debt market is so unrealistic. In my opinion, there is junk bond selling. There was junk bond selling in a negative territory at one point, like in other countries. Like that's hard for me to understand. Like why somebody would be willing to buy a bond knowing that it's a junk bond and it's going to pay back a negative interest rate. You must have a lot of confidence in the understanding that interest rates are going to go down into the future to buy something like that. But it happened. So if those things were to start defaulting, like there is no place to run to. You can't, I mean, if you had a junk bond that had a negative interest rate towards it and it started to go into default, there's nobody you're going to be able to sell that to. You lose your money. That's it. I mean, you might be able to sell it for a couple of pennies on the dollar, if that. It's just a controlled collapse by the Fed. Well, yeah. Collapse to what? I mean, what is it that they want to bring in? I mean, they want everybody to just die. I mean, a lot of people think that. Like, they just want everybody to just be dead. Okay, I mean, if that's the outcome that you think that they're pushing towards, then yeah, I'd be scared too, but I just don't see that. I think it's more of an enslavement type of thing. Like, they want everybody deeply in debt for life. Like, all the money that you earn, if it went towards an interest payment, they would be like, that's it. We made our goal. Yes, you know? So Canada quietly becoming a powerhouse. You think so? Why is that? He's on the Oregon coast. This is just fall weather. Yeah, that's for sure. This is nothing outstanding. Except for the lightning last night. That was pretty cool. We don't get a whole lot of thunder and lightning here. And we got a little bit yesterday, which was pretty cool. Great content. Keep it coming. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that. I mean, you guys are awesome. Thanks for hanging out with me here on my lunch, 445 of you guys. That's incredible. And all the thumbs up. I really appreciate that. That really helps to get the videos spread around the internet. Is that a chicken burrito? No, this is a breakfast burrito vegetarian style. And only because I'm trying all the different burritos from the co-op there. And this is the one I haven't had yet. And it's pretty good. I kind of like, I would like to have chicken or beef or something up in there to, give it a little bit more substance to it. But, it's pretty decent. Tastes good. Does tapering strengthen the U.S. dollar? Well, that'll be dependent. Like, in my opinion, tapering would strengthen the U.S. dollar if it was done if it's done in a way that the Treasury is also acting in a way that causes the dollar to strengthen. Now, that's kind of difficult to kind of wrap your head around, but if you can just kind of look at where like the demand for U.S. dollars comes from and how much people are going to want to hold U.S. Treasuries, because those two are kind of like a combined thing that a lot of people think as one. They think it is one single issue, but it's not. It's two. And so when you have like less treasuries out there, then could cause a demand for treasuries. And if there's a demand for treasuries, then there would be a demand for dollars to go along with it. You need the dollars in order to get the treasuries. So those two kind of work hand in hand with each other. There could come a situation in which the Federal Reserve could back off on their purchases. At the same time, the Treasury keeps issuing out more treasuries, like fills the demand for treasuries, if the world out there is willing to continue to buy those treasuries. In that case, then yes, you would still have like, a high strengthening dollar. But if you came to a point in which that like people are unloading the treasuries, like they don't want them anymore, and the interest rates begin to rise and people are like trying to sell those treasuries off to get the dollars, again, You could have strengthening dollars during that time until they unload those dollars again, moving it back into the United States to purchase what? Like, foreign goods, like you got to think you're a foreigner with US dollars. Now what do? You got to you want to unload your dollars. You just sold your treasuries, you got your dollars. Now what do you do with them? Because you don't want them. You got to find somebody to, to sell those things to. That situation right there, that would be a very weakening of the dollar, right? After people got a hold of them and then they wanted to unload those things. So you can see like there's this path that it's not like a chain, boom, now it's done. No, it's like a process that kind of goes through it all. That's why people get so upset with me, I think, is because yes, the dollar will eventually fail if they continue down this path. Like there's no other choice. It's either that or the people would have to feel such an extreme amount of pain for so long in order to keep the dollar viable that they just wouldn't be willing to do it. So once that pain starts to kick in, that's where the dollar is going to strengthen. That's where people are going to be like, oh my gosh, look where the dollar is purchasing. Look how much stuff you can purchase with the dollar. After that, it's going to be a very interesting situation on what the Federal Reserve would do in order to keep those flooded dollars from just being unleashed. And, it's the whole reason why the dollar even has strength is because people will hold on to it. That's it. It's just a confidence game. And so if you get to a point where people are like, oh man, I don't want this thing anymore, there's a path that they have to follow in order to get out of it. It's not just like, okay, we're done, we're out, like we'll be done with it the next day. It's a process. And that process is going to be very, very obscuring. People are going to look at that and go like, holy moly, what's going on here? We should be getting into dollars at the time that you should actually be getting out. And I don't know, maybe I'll try and think of a video that explains that a little bit more, because I know right now I'm kind of babbling and I'm not making a lot of sense on that. But anyway, I got to go back to work. So, Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.